The spirits are relentless. The problem with hiring the lowest bidder to work as fast as possible is that they don't like to adhere to simple instructions. The company the cemetery hired was from a neighboring town. They were given very specific instructions about the work they were to do, with the most important instruction of all being repeated at least 1,000 times. All work for the day is to be concluded before 8 p.m., and no one is allowed to re-enter the cemetery once the gates are locked, until the gates are unlocked at 6 a.m. the following morning. The first couple weeks, the crews seemed to understand the strictness of the rule and concluded the daily work well before 8, when an exceptionally cool summer day allowed for perfect conditions to make serious progress building the columbarium. Their workday stretched to nearly 8:45 before they had been finally forced out of the cemetery by Isaac, Thomas, and myself, just in time for us to lock the gates at 9. With much grumbling from the workers, about another 45 minutes before dark to make progress, they got into their vehicles and drove off to our fancy Motel 13. Isaac joined us from the north gate, and the four of us met back at the admin building for a quick game of ping pong before doing rounds. Since the renovations began, all four of us have been required to work 6 days a week to make sure no one else enters the cemetery. Usually the presence of a night guard would deter any would-be fence jumpers. The pay has been great, but it sucks only being able to have only one night off, and I am looking forward to going back to my 3 days a week. Luckily, I haven't had any emotionally devastating reunions, and having more living people in the cemetery at night has made me feel more relaxed. Just after 11 o'clock, gate lock, we heard a banging on the south gate, just as the four of us sat down to play a game of 4-player chess. Thomas made a board during one of his days off and was apparently a decent player when he was in high school. With collective silent cursing, we all got up and made our way to see who was dumb enough to bang on the gates of hell. Standing outside was one of the contractors berating our rushing of him outside, as he had forgotten his cell phone inside. We all collectively gave him "what do you want us to do" gesture, as he failed to tell us where his cell phone was. Our lack of vocal communication had only angered him further as he began throwing a tantrum about wanting his phone. I pointed to the gate and shook my head as he pulled on the bars and yelled for us to unlock it. Thomas and Isaac began walking off in a vain attempt to locate his phone. I have seen spirits, demons, and animal plant rock hybrids scream and yell for hours on end, but I have never seen a grown man scream for nearly an hour over anything. Right as it seemed he had finally resolved to defeat and was going to turn to leave, Kyle put his key in the lock for the gate and locked it as the midnight alarm tolled. Taking this as an insult, the contractor decided he wasn't going to let a bunch of rent-a-cops keep him from his precious. Kyle and I watched as he pulled and pushed himself up and over the gates with an impressive determination that would be the envy of the high schoolers trying to get out of the cemetery during their ritualistic sacrifices. As his body dropped to the ground and he shakily landed on his feet, he opened his mouth and sealed his fate. "Fuck you! You are all nothing but a bunch of fuck!" were the last words he ever said, as the excommunicated priest split at the shoulder, revealing a series of jagged teeth running down to his hip. A long purplish tongue licked at the air as his face screwed up in an angry expression of joy. The sudden appearance of this hungry fiend left the worker in stunned silence and prevented him from seeing the wrought iron spikes slowly pierce him from the arms of the iron and alabaster golem that had been waiting for him since we found him banging on the gate. A spike piercing through his open mouth and shoulder had left him in a panicked shock that did not even begin exhaling his death rattle until the fallen priest took a massive bite out of the man's torso. His wicked, toothy grin and vacant eyes, never breaking eye contact with me. Lapping at the red wetness pouring from the mangled mistake of a man was the 3-head fox thing. that had taken the form of my long-lost friend. Kyle and I turned away and walked off to a group with Thomas and Isaac, who had found the phone of the condemned contractor left beside a pile of discarded cans of Red Bull near the columbarium. We shook our heads as they approached, and their defeated looks were all the communication that was needed. Isaac snapped the phone and tossed it into the fountain before making their way to hose off any missed remains. When we unlocked the gate in the morning, we met with the cemetery director and informed him of the unwelcome intruder that night, and were informed that the situation would be handled. Now when we arrive at the cemetery, all of the contractors have long since vacated. With any luck, the renovations will be over soon. From what I have been able to tell, their progress has been exponentially expedited. The columbarium has already been finished, and all of the displaced remains have been interned once more. The mausoleum is nearly finished, and the admin building has never looked better. Starting next week, we are to scale down to 3 guards a night and should be back to our normal schedule by the end of the month. As much as I enjoyed having more lively company during my night shift, I think having so many living souls in the cemetery at night angered the permanent residents. I don't know what was told to the outsiders, but word around town is that the missing worker was stealing tools and trying to pawn them off. Due to the outstanding morals of the local pawn shop owner, the clearly stolen items were identified, and when a call was made to the local authorities, the thief skipped town before he could face justice. If only he had just gone a night without his phone, he could have told his own stories of the self-righteous night guards that wouldn't let him just pop inside the cemetery. Instead, he got the chance to find out firsthand that rules are put into place for a reason. Immortality isn't for the living. The renovations have finally been completed, and things in the cemetery have begun to return to whatever level of normalcy I have become accustomed to. Since the night Callahan partook in consuming the body of that contractor, he has become persona non grata among the night guards. Anytime he tries to insert his presence or force acknowledgement, we fully ignore his presence. He has not received this treatment well, and has slowly begun to either turn or return into a more demonic form. The mouthy form running down his body opens and closes more frequently, and his skin has started to take on the appearance of shale. He has also been spending more time around the howlers that congregate around the duck pond on overcast nights. Thomas and I have been coming in at 7 p.m. and staying until 7 a.m. to look around the cemetery for any familiar gravestones. We only work together once or twice a week, so it has been a slow process. The cemetery director has been adamant about the need for another night guard and is currently spending longer days crunching the budget to add another guard. He has assured us that we will be able to work as much or as little as we desire as soon as we hire or train our 5th guard. I still have many concerns about bringing more people in to potentially face the hunger that is never satiated. Having more guards each night, with the plan of having 3 guards every night, would make me more at ease with more living souls on patrol. However, the response to having so many people within a cemetery overnight always draws the attention of the malevolence lurking within. Several years ago, we had the worst case of the midnight run that I have ever experienced. It was after the homecoming football game against the town rivals, where the home team won in a complete upset. With an 85-yard rushing touchdown by quarterback Jimmy, he was able to score as the timer ran out with a final score of 23-21. The air of immortality had been coursing amongst him, his entire team, and faithfully, its crew of shitty friends. The chanting of Jimmy 11 brought us to heaven could be heard long before they entered the cemetery. Eli had no way of getting to the southeast corner to deter would-be trespassers in time. Not that I would think it would have made any difference. 8 teens, full of youthful vigor. hopped into the cemetery with thoughts of scholarship to OSU, LSU, UMich, UGA, or UA, when reality finally broke their lost potential. I had been returning to a game of chess with Mad Michael when I saw the fastest of the group run past me screaming. Balls of magma and feathers singed his hair as branches of tar and oak ripped at his clothes and skin. Close in tow, tearing at the skin of his ankles and cloth of his shoes, was a pack of mangy fish, shedding their rusty nails and sweet gumballs as their claws stretched out for purchase. He could have possibly made it to the fence if not for a blob of tar bubbling out and onto his eyes, blinding him from the headstone that jutted him from the earth. As his body plummeted to the cold ground, his body was embraced in eternal darkness as his life was extinguished in a mass of fire and furry piranhas. Stepping away from the site to reunite with Eli, we locked eyes separated only by the gruesome demise of Jimmy to the hands of Regent. Hands stained black and eyes bulging with hate of maggots, Regent sunk his jagged teeth into the neck of Jimmy, ripping at his skin with gluttonous savagery. Hands with fingers too long and with too many joints wrapped around his ankles, locking him into place. Lustful eyes licked at rotten lips before sliding tongues up his tattered jeans. In defense of Jimmy, he put up the best fight he could as his cannon arms swung at the entangling bodies wrapping around him. His fist connected into a pulping mass of raven black head of hair. The shrieking woman bit down onto his groin at the sudden bash she had received. A swarm of flies, sap, and murky moss muffled his scream with a vile kiss. His body slowly buckled under the weight of Regent, forcing him on top of the coven that climbed up his legs until his chest burst open with spiders and moss, raining onto the blood pooled below. The others had suffered for less, but I still did not envy the terror that consumed their bodies before the cemetery consumed them. It had taken the remainder of the night to clear the debris of human remains. The homecoming dance that year had been cancelled, and a period of mourning was held for the dangers of underage drunk driving. The importance of abstaining from alcohol until legally eligible and never driving after having any intoxicants had been the reoccurring mantra for the remainder of that year. Every bar and liquor store in town checked every ID, and designated drivers were on constant call to prevent another tragic loss of life from ever occurring again. No one in the town asked why Jimmy's car was parked outside of the cemetery and without a single blemish. The fact was, he died in a drunk driving accident that killed him and 7 of his closest friends. The midnight run is a tradition as old as the cemetery. Hopefully with more guards to keep a watch, the risk of getting caught will help deter any more sacrifices. I doubt that it will. The cemetery calls to anyone in town in one way or another. In my small town, you either die in the cemetery or you are buried in it. The horrors become the night. I have only attempted to train one person in the 14 years I have worked in my local cemetery. I now have the incredible task of training 2 young men in the ways of the night guard. Jacob and Seth are either the next new night guards or the next sacrifices to the cemetery. They both have been given an intense breakdown of the responsibilities and the importance of not talking after the gates are closed. Something that should be a simple 1-minute rundown, but usually lasts a couple hours over the severity of consequences if you open your mouth and say anything to anyone. If a ghost can hear you speak, they can cross whatever threshold that bars them from touching the material world and directly interact with the speaker. There is no love for those that welcome the touch of death. The only relief I was able to guarantee for myself was the responsibility of watching over only 1 new trainee at a time, alternating between the 2 each shift I work. The first night of training, Jacob had been an easy night that had only had one strange occurrence that I have never seen before. Just after the 10 p.m. gate lock, Jacob and I were making our way to clean up the new mausoleum. There had been no remains that needed to be cleaned, and it was just a collection of litter that had been left behind by the town's residents. The former mayor had not been very popular, and the standing rumor was that he embezzled a lot of money during his time as mayor. Upon removing the last of the rotten produce, a grating metal on concrete sound approached us from behind. The former contractor that had lost his temper and then his life over a phone groaned a muffled shriek. Wrought iron spindles pierced throughout his body and face made it impossible for him to communicate any words to us. The slight clinking of his spindles as they bounced off of one another whenever he tried to move echoed in our ears. His skin had soured to the color of spoiled tuna around the oversized piercings. Any attempt he would make to remove the spindles as he neared us proved fruitless, as his arms were fixed in place, leaving him unable to clasp onto any of the rods. Not that he could have actually grabbed onto something, as his fingers bent and twisted like branches of corkscrew willow. The lower half of his clothing was stained burgundy with dried blood that appeared decades old. I put a hand on Jacob's shoulder and guided him past the departed, making sure to have myself between him and the latest occupier of the night. This was the first time I had seen someone been killed by the spirits within the cemetery return as another of the imprisoned nightmares. I had always assumed that the next unfortunate souls consumed by the cemetery were just that, consumed, devoured, devoid of existence in any afterlife, either heaven or hell. Now I had proof that not all killed in the cemetery were never truly to be seen again, or an outlier of someone so full of rage that he was cursed to consume the souls of others just as he had been consumed. Jacob had taken his first encounter with the night dwellers surprisingly well. He had tensed when I placed a hand on his shoulder, but his legs did not lock in place as he was guided away. Most important of all, he did not speak at the sight. The remainder of the night had been uneventful, and Jacob turns out to be quite the ping-pong player. Thomas and I did a 2v1 against him, and he skunked us twice in a row. He won every single match we played, and I could tell the distraction was good for him. Mad Michael really enjoyed watching us play and kept score. He even only made one vague prediction of death the entire time. Mad Michael has become one of the new favorite spirits since Callahan killed that contractor. Mrs. McCarthy is still the anonymous favorite, as her raunchy tales have somehow become even more explicit without the chastising from a disgraced priest. I don't think I ever heard a wilder story involving a branding iron, a bottle of scotch, and a pigeon before my entire life. My next shift I was with Isaac, and I told him about seeing the contractor again. He was equally confused, as he had also never seen anyone come back after dying in the cemetery. We agreed that we would have to ask Eli or one of the other old guards if they had seen anything like that before. Seth was given another rundown about the rules and warned again that under no circumstances is he to talk to anyone while the gates are locked. With a nod, we set out for another night, and Seth stood in lockstep with me every night we walked the grounds. Seth was shaken by the night. The job was not for him. This became more and more obvious as Callahan split open with a demented shriek as I held up a middle finger to him as we walked by. When Mrs. McCarthy made a crass comment about having a hot piece of ass keeping an eye over her stomping grounds, I was certain Seth was going to lose his dinner. It is actually quite a sight to see someone blush redder than a tomato, while also looking green in the gills. I was certain of my decision to tell him in the morning to find work elsewhere when we found the forewarning given by Mad Michael during my previous shift. Suspended in the air by a series of winged squids with spiked vines for tentacles was an indistinguishable mass of human remains. What was once a torso, or a head, or maybe even a thigh, was being repeatedly kicked by the iron-pierced contractor before the three-faced fox unhinged its middle jaw to consume the meaty chunk. To his defense, Seth did not say a word until the gates were unlocked in the morning. As the three of us stepped outside, he said he didn't think the job was for him. I wholeheartedly agreed and bid him farewell. Making $1,000 for a night's good money to make, but the alcohol needed to dull the memory will become expensive without the slow apathy that grows the longer you guard the night. I feel bad for Seth with his first night, being as rough as it was. And yet, the cemetery is a place not for the living to so carelessly enter. Not everyone can comprehend the horrors within, and even I am only able to give a feeble attempt at describing the amalgamations that I see. The fountain depicts Freebiter and Phantasos, the Greek gods of nightmares both real and surreal. But of the two, I think that if any being truly rules over the cemetery, Phantasos is the one who domineers the night.